All right, so we're back for another deep dive, and today we're going to be tackling something that's pretty complex.
Definitely.
It's legal gender marker changes around the world.
Hmm.
And, you sent over this incredible stack of research and article,
Yes.
and it looks like most of this is from 2024.
Yeah. As recent as we could get it.
Wow.
Such a fast-moving topic.
Yeah, it seems like it's definitely not one size fits all.
Oh, absolutely not. It's actually pretty remarkable how much variation there is. Awesome.
Yeah.
Are you ready to dive in?
Yeah, let's do it.
Data on the screen, numbers come alive. Male, female flows where the patterns thrive. Visual charts, public colors unify. Gender decoded, bringing truth to light. Small drum fill. We break it down, real talk. Trends unveiling, facts from every block. Here's your insight, watch the data glide. Gender decoded, let the beats collide. We break it down, real talk. Trends unveiling, facts from every block. Here's your insight, watch the data glide. Gender decoded, let the beats collide.
Today, we're taking a trip around the world
Ooh, a trip.
to discover why something as basic as changing the M or F on your ID.
You mean like male or female?
Yep, exactly. Can be a surprisingly big deal in some places.
Oh, yeah, I can definitely see that.
Our guidebook for this adventure is a document called Gender Marker Change Around the World
Catchy title.
with data from 2024.
So it's pretty up to date then.
Yeah, it's super detailed, but don't
You
worry.
can make sure it's fun.
We'll break it all down for you.
Think of us as your personal translators for all the legal stuff.
I like that. So to get started, let's take a look at the big picture.
Big picture.
The report uses this color-coded map to categorize countries,
Ooh, a map. I love maps.
and it's amazing to see the patterns.
So what are we looking at here?
Well, imagine a rainbow, but instead of colors.
Okay, got it.
It represents how easy or hard it is to change your gender marker in different countries.
So like a difficulty scale.
Exactly.
Cool. Okay, so what do the colors mean?
Okay, so picture this countries, shaded in blue, are the rock stars.
Rock stars.
They've made it simple and straightforward.
Straightforward. How?
No medical hoops to jump through, just a self-declaration and you're good to go.
Wow, that's amazing.
I know, right?
So like in those blue countries, it's easy peasy to change your gender marker.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Denmark, Malta, Iceland.
Oh, yeah. I've heard they're pretty progressive.
They're leading the way with these self-declaration models,
It's like they trust people to know their own gender identity.
which they should.
Totally agree. What about the countries in green, though?
Ooh, those get a little trickier.
Trickier how?
You need a medical diagnosis.
A diagnosis.
Yeah, to back up your request for a gender marker change.
So like a doctor's note or something?
Pretty much just something like gender dysphoria
Hmm.
or a similar classification from a professional.
So that adds like an extra step, right? A potential roadblock for some people?
Exactly. It can be a barrier.
Can you explain what gender dysphoria means for people who might not know?
Sure, it means someone experiences distress or discomfort
But stress about what?
because there's a mismatch between their assigned sex at birth and their gender identity.
Got it. So in those green countries, medical professionals have a lot of power.
Yeah, they hold a lot of power in the process.
I see how that could be a problem.
And then it gets even more complex when you look at the light green or yellow countries.
No, more complex. How so?
Those are the ones where you have to actually undergo surgery to change your gender marker.
Whoa, surgery. That's a huge step.
I know, right? It's not just paperwork anymore. It's a major medical decision.
Wow. So, are there any arguments against those surgery requirements?
Yeah, a lot of people argue it's a violation of human rights.
I can see why they would say that.
They say it puts pressure on people and could even be dangerous for some.
Makes sense. Okay, so we've got blue, green, and light green on our map.
What other colors are we working with here?
Well, then you have the yellow countries.
Yellow.
Sometimes they use other colors too, but those are usually the federations.
Oh, right, like the United States.
Exactly. The U.S. is a perfect example of how this system can be a real pain.
So it's not the same across the whole country.
Nope. Some states are great, like California, New York.
Oh, those sound good.
They've got self-declaration. It's pretty easy.
But I'm guessing it's not that easy everywhere?
Sadly, no. In some states, it's a nightmare.
How bad are we talking?
Like legal battle surgery required, sometimes even banned altogether.
Wow, talk about inconsistency.
Right. It's crazy. Like your rights depend on your zip code.
It's a reminder that even within one country, things can be so different.
And then it gets even more wild.
More wild.
You've got the orange zones on the map.
Orange zones. Okay, what's going on there?
Those are places where the legal situation is, shall we say, ambiguous?
Ambiguity.
Like maybe there aren't any specific laws about this stuff.
So how does it work?
It's basically up to individual administrators or judges.
So it's like a total gamble.
Pretty much, people can have completely different experiences.
That doesn't sound very fair.
It's not. And then, sadly, we have the red countries,
Red countries.
where changing your gender marker is completely illegal.
Illegal.
Sadly. Yeah, it all comes down to cultural and religious beliefs often.
It's a stark reminder that we still have a long way to go.
We really do. And then last but not least, you've got the striped areas.
Striped areas.
Those are the places where the data is just missing.
Missing. How come?
Could be a lack of research, secretive governments, who knows?
So it's like a big question mark.
Exactly. This whole landscape is constantly evolving.
So what I'm curious about is what's causing all these differences.
That is the million-dollar question, and it's what we'll be exploring next. But first,
Ooh, a cliffhanger.
what surprised you the most about this map?
Honestly, the biggest surprise for me is just how much variation there is.
It really makes you think, doesn't it?
It does something we might take for granted.
Like changing a letter on a document.
Exactly. It can be a monumental struggle for someone else.
It all depends on where you live.
All right, well, now that we've got the overview, let's zoom in on some specific regions.
Specific regions.
Europe, for example, has a pretty interesting divide, wouldn't you say?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Let's unpack that next.
Let's do it. All right, so we're zooming in on Europe now.
Europe. Okay.
And what's interesting is
What's that?
Western and Northern Europe
Mm-hmm.
are mostly blue on this map. You know?
Oh, yeah, the progressive ones.
Yeah, those self-declaration zones.
Makes sense.
But then you look at Eastern and Southeastern Europe.
Hmm.
It's a mix of green requiring a diagnosis
Oh,
and even some light green where surgery is mandatory.
yeah, it's quite a contrast, isn't it?
It is. What do you think is behind that difference?
Well, I think it reflects those broader social trends, you know?
What do you mean?
Like, Western and Northern Europe have often been at the forefront of LGBTQ plus rights.
Oh, yeah, they've got strong advocacy movements there, right?
Exactly. And just a more general acceptance of diversity, I think,
It's like those cultures are more open to the idea of individual choice.
when it comes to identity.
Yeah, without the government or doctors interfering.
Yeah, autonomy is key there.
Right. Meanwhile, in parts of Eastern and Southeastern Europe,
Things are a bit more traditional, I'd say.
you think so?
Yeah, religion and social norms play a bigger role.
I can see that.
And those sometimes clash with progressive views on gender.
Makes sense. So it's not just about the laws themselves,
It's about the whole context.
the culture, the history.
Exactly. It's all connected.
Okay, let's hop over to North America now.
North America, okay.
What do you see there?
Well, the U.S. is all one color on this map.
But knowing what we know about federations,
Oh, I bet it's not that simple.
you're right. It's not that simple at all.
Okay, so tell me more.
The U.S. is a prime example of how this federal system can be confusing.
Confusing how?
Well, you've got some states that are super progressive.
Which ones?
Like California, New York, they've embraced self-declaration.
Oh, that's good.
It's relatively easy there.
Sounds good so far.
There's a but.
There is in other states, it's a totally different story. How so?
Changing your gender marker can be a real struggle.
A struggle?
Some require surgery, some even ban it altogether.
Seriously? Wow, that's wild.
It's mind-boggling. Your rights can literally depend on your location.
So it creates this crazy patchwork of rights.
Exactly, which is totally unfair.
So your rights could change just from moving?
It's possible. It highlights the need for more consistency.
Okay, so the U.S. is complicated.
Very complicated. What about Canada?
Canada's usually a bit more unified, I think.
Good.
They've generally been pretty progressive on this.
That's good to hear.
Yeah, most provinces make it pretty straightforward
Straightforward means
to change your gender marker.
I see. So they're taking a more human-centered approach there.
I think so, yeah. Recognizing people's lived reality.
Okay, so from North America, let's head south
South, okay.
to Latin America, a region that's been pretty pioneering.
Pioneering how?
When it comes to gender identity rights,
Oh, right.
Argentina in particular gets a lot of praise for their laws.
I've heard good things. Yeah.
Does their gender identity law live up to the hype?
Oh, totally. They passed this amazing law back in 2012.
2012.
Yeah. It basically lets people change their legal gender, no questions asked.
No questions asked. What do you mean?
Like no medical requirements at all, no surgery, no diagnosis.
So just self-declaration.
Exactly. It was groundbreaking, and it's inspired other countries to follow suit.
I bet it has. That's awesome. Are other countries following their lead?
Some are, some aren't.
Okay, like who?
Uruguay has made great strides. They've adopted similar policies.
That's great.
But in other places, it's still tough.
What's holding them back?
I think those traditional views on gender and sexuality are still very strong.
It's a reminder that progress isn't always linear.
Right. Sometimes there are setbacks.
Okay, let's move on to Asia now.
Asia, whoa, okay.
A continent with so much diversity.
For sure.
I imagine there's a huge range of approaches there.
You'd be right. Asia's like this blend of ancient traditions and modern laws.
And how's that playing out when it comes to gender identity?
In some really interesting ways, actually, like...
Like what? Give me an example.
Okay, so you've got countries like Nepal and Pakistan.
Okay.
They've actually incorporated third gender categories into their legal systems.
Wow, third gender categories.
Yep, acknowledging that gender isn't always a simple binary.
That's a big step, isn't it?
It is. It shows they're recognizing that spectrum of human experience.
But I'm guessing even in those countries, it's not always easy.
Sadly, you're right. Even with those categories, the process can be tough.
And in other Asian countries.
It's still a long way off for a lot of them.
What are the main obstacles there?
We've got cultural norms, religious beliefs.
Right. Those could be powerful forces.
And let's not forget the impact of colonialism.
Ooh, that's a good point.
Yeah, a lot of countries are still dealing with laws from that era.
Laws that
criminalize or pathologize LGBTQ plus identities.
It's like they're trying to move forward with this heavyweight from the past.
Yeah, it's a tough situation for sure.
Okay. Are we ready for Africa?
Hit me with it.
Right. So Africa, another diverse continent, obviously.
Absolutely.
What are we seeing there in terms of legal gender recognition?
It's honestly a real mix. Some countries are actively debating new laws
To protect LGBTQ plus people.
Exactly. But others have laws that are really restrictive.
Even dangerous.
Sadly, yes. I think colonialism and religious fundamentalism are big factors there.
It sounds like there are many battles being fought.
On multiple fronts, for sure.
Legal, social, cultural.
So finding that balance, you know?
Balance between...
Respecting local contexts and upholding human rights.
The delicate balance, for sure.
For sure. Okay, last stop on our world tour.
Last up.
Oceania.
Oceania. I know Australia is kind of interesting, right?
Oh, yeah, they've got that split personality thing going on.
Split personality, how so?
Well, remember those federations we talked about?
Yeah.
Australia is another one where the policies change from state to state.
Same issue as the U.S. Your rights depend on where you live.
Pretty much. Yeah, it's a recipe for confusion.
What about New Zealand? They seem to be doing well.
Oh, New Zealand is fantastic. They've simplified the process.
For changing gender markers.
Yep. And they're really thinking about non-binary people, too.
They're setting a good example, it sounds like.
Totally.
Okay, well, we've covered a lot of ground here. We've seen the big picture.
Yeah, we zoomed in on different regions.
I'm starting to get a sense of the patterns.
Me too.
But I think it's time to really make this personal for our listener.
What do you mean?
Let's talk about how these laws, or the lack of them,
affect real people's lives.
Exactly. Because ultimately, that's what matters most.
Okay. I like where this is going.
So are you ready to hear some personal stories?
Oh, absolutely. Bring them on.
So we've seen the map.
Yeah.
We've seen the laws.
Yeah. The big picture.
But now it's time to talk about the people, right?
The human impact.
Exactly. Our source material highlights some really powerful perspectives.
Oh, yeah.
From different groups within the trans and gender diverse community.
So where should we start?
I think it's important to understand the challenges faced by trans men and women.
Okay, yeah, those challenges are significant.
When it comes to these laws.
Like, how do these laws actually affect their lives?
Exactly. So let's start there.
Okay, cool.
All right. So for many trans people, having accurate legal documents is crucial for daily life.
Oh, absolutely.
We're talking travel, healthcare, employment.
Even simple things like opening a bank account.
It affects everything.
You're constantly having to explain yourself.
Or worse, facing suspicion and discrimination.
Just because your ID doesn't match who you are.
It's exhausting.
And it can be really dehumanizing.
And then you add in those countries that require surgery.
Oh, right. Those surgery requirements?
The hurdles become even higher.
Yeah. Not everyone can afford surgery.
There are long waiting lists.
And some people just don't want it.
They don't feel it's necessary for them.
Exactly. It's their choice.
It really comes down to bodily autonomy, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's a fundamental right.
Forcing someone to have surgery just to be recognized.
It feels like a violation.
It really does.
So many trans people feel trapped.
Trapped by the system.
Yeah, legally, socially, personally.
Until they meet these conditions that are often arbitrary.
It's a real struggle.
It makes you wonder why we're still clinging to this binary system.
Yeah, it doesn't reflect reality.
Okay, so we've talked about trans men and women.
Yeah.
But what about non-binary and gender non-conforming folks?
Oh, that's a whole other layer of complexity.
How do they navigate these systems?
Well, for many of them, it's even harder.
Harder how?
A lot of countries just don't recognize their identities at all.
So they're forced into these boxes that don't fit.
Exactly. Male or female, even if neither feels right.
And that invalidation has real consequences.
It affects everything. Healthcare, jobs, travel.
It can lead to discrimination and exclusion.
It's a constant battle.
Some countries offer an X or other marker.
Yeah, on passports.
But it feels like we need to go much further.
We do. We need to move beyond this binary.
Create systems that actually reflect the diversity of gender.
Absolutely.
Okay. Our source material also mentions this idea of third gender.
Oh, right.
Or culturally specific genders.
Yeah, can you talk a bit more about that?
Sure. So in some cultures,
Yeah.
the idea of a strict binary just isn't the norm.
Right. They have traditions of recognizing people outside of male and female.
Like the Hijras in South Asia,
Yeah.
the Mohu in Hawaii.
Two-spirit people in indigenous cultures.
They've been honored for centuries.
It's amazing.
But then you look at the legal systems.
And there's a disconnect.
It's like these traditional cultures are more accepting than the laws.
It's true, those colonial legacies are still so powerful.
We need legal systems that are both sensitive and uphold human rights.
Right. Finding that balance is key.
Okay, before we wrap up, any aha moments from the report that stuck with you?
Oh, yeah, tons. Like, it's actually pretty inspiring to see how fast things are changing in some places.
Like where?
Like Argentina, remember their gender identity law?
Yeah, from 2012.
Yeah. That one's considered one of the most progressive in the world.
What makes it so special?
It gives people the right to change their legal gender. No questions asked.
No questions asked.
No medical requirements whatsoever.
Wow, so just pure self-determination.
Exactly. It's a model for other countries.
It's amazing how one country's actions can inspire change globally.
It really is. And speaking of progress, Iceland's Identity Act of 2019,
Oh, yeah.
that one's great too. They introduced a third gender option.
Wow, so they're explicitly recognizing non-binary people.
They are. It's a big step.
There's definitely momentum building in some parts of the world.
Oh, for sure. And we can't forget Uruguay.
What about Uruguay?
They were actually ahead of the game. They've been allowing changes since 2009.
Wow. I didn't realize they were pioneers.
They are. It's pretty cool.
It shows that change can happen anywhere.
And often starts with just a few brave individuals.
So inspiring. Okay, what about challenges or setbacks? Anything we need to be aware of?
Well, one thing that stood out was the potential for fragmentation in those federations, like the US, Germany, Australia.
Right, that patchwork of policies.
Yeah, it creates so much confusion and inequality.
Your rights shouldn't depend on where you live.
Exactly. And another thing to remember is that these legal landscapes can shift really quickly.
Oh yeah, court rulings, new laws, public opinion.
It can all change in an instant.
Progress is never guaranteed.
We have to stay vigilant.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground. We've heard the stories.
The global patterns, the personal impacts.
As we wrap up this deep dive, what are the key takeaways for our listeners?
Well, I think one of the biggest things is just the sheer diversity of approaches out there.
Diversity of approaches.
To legal gender recognition.
Around the world.
There's no one-size-fits-all solution.
And we have to be sensitive to those differences.
What works in one place might not work in another.
It's about finding that balance.
Between universal human rights and respecting different cultures.
Absolutely. Another key takeaway, I think, is the importance of listening to trans and gender diverse people.
Oh, yes, their voices need to be heard.
These aren't just abstract legal concepts.
They affect real lives.
Their safety, their well-being.
Their sense of belonging.
We need to amplify those voices.
And fight for policies that meet their needs.
Absolutely. And lastly, I think it's crucial to remember that this is an ongoing process.
It's a journey.
Laws are being challenged. Progress is being made. Setbacks are happening.
It's constantly evolving.
It's dynamic. We all have a role to play in shaping a more just and equitable world.
for trans and gender diverse people everywhere.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive
Wow, what a journey.
into legal gender recognition around the world.
It's been fascinating.
I hope you've all learned as much as I have.
Me too. It's been a pleasure unpacking all of this with you.
The learning doesn't stop here, though.
Oh, definitely not.
Keep exploring this topic. Connect with organizations doing great work.
Use your voice to advocate for change.
Get involved. Stay informed.
Yes.
Never stop learning. And if you're feeling inspired, share your thoughts with us on social media.
Using the hashtag.
Hashtag The Deep Dive. We love hearing from you all.
Until next time.
Keep diving deep and keep those curious minds open.